Welcome to the Food for the Heart Bible Study. Those of you that are out on Facebook, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Don't hesitate to jump on the Zoom call. Welcome to the folks that are on the Zoom call. I'm so glad to see each one of you. You are my family. You're my church family, just as verily as any church family is my church family. So I'm very grateful that you're here. And we're going to have a presentation tonight. Then we're going to have some group discussion. And then we're going to have some breakout groups. So we have a really full evening. And I'm really, really, really thankful for the Food for the Heart Bible study. Let me just start out by sharing a little bit about my own life experience. I think the best sermon illustrations are life experience. I'm going to be talking about the beginning of our life timeline tonight. Human beings live from babyhood to adulthood on a trajectory of development of relational skill. What I mean by that is that at every stage of human experience, from babyhood to old age, we are learning how to love and be loved. God organized human life so that we would learn at every stage how to love and be loved, and every stage would build on the last stage. So we're going to be starting tonight with the first stage of human life, and that is a babe in our parents' arms. What are some of the things that happen? How do we see God's design at that stage of our life in a way that inspires us and helps us to be even more kind of overjoyed and in awe of his plan for human existence, and particularly for people learning how to love throughout life? Well, I want to share my own experience with having children of my own. Of course, I was born to a mother, but I don't really remember that. I do remember having my own children. You may or may not know this, but I didn't want to have kids. I was too task-oriented, I thought, too career-oriented, too driven. And I thought, I'm just going to be so aggravated having to wipe faces and butts and all this stuff. And I really didn't think I would be very good at it. But I did know that maybe God would want me to have children, because there are moral and spiritual reasons why people that have children have to come out of themselves often. Couples that don't have children can struggle with selfishness. There's a way to fix that, and that is to adopt. If you don't want to have biological children, adopt spiritual children. And in a sense, you have children. But it's a really great way of learning how to love the way God loves. Having a child is a really profound spiritual experience. And so I knew that that was the fact, and that I didn't want to totally close the door on having children. So I'll just suffice to say that I was avoiding it by using various methods, but they weren't foolproof methods. And I ended up getting pregnant twice. And that's my two children. Kimmy and Allison live in Portland, Oregon. They're 32 and 34 respectively, so they're all grown up. But for me, having children was the most powerfully impacting life experience, short of becoming a Christian, my conversion experience, and getting married. Those are the three most watershed, significant events in my life. And I think bearing children is right up there with getting married. I mean, it was so profound. First of all, I had two children without anesthesia. Now, we were into the granola thing and the all natural thing. And man, you don't mess around. Like, if you're going to try to have children without anesthesia, you better get ready for some pain. But of course, I was of the mindset that just no drugs under any circumstances. And I think I would do it over again the same way, because those medications potentially could have an effect on the child or whatever. For whatever reason, I decided to go all natural. It was really intensely painful, but it was a powerful experience both times. And I have to say, having children, when I saw those little beings that all they could do was eat, cry, and poop, that really generated no merit, made no contribution in and of themselves. All they could do is just try to get their own needs met. They weren't thinking about me. They didn't care about me. They didn't even know me. And I looked at those beings, and all I could feel for them was profound, overwhelming love. And I thought how much like God's love for his children. We're so often so oblivious to his needs and to his heart and to his agenda, so to speak, his purposes. Most of humanity lives in oblivion to who God is and just his person. And yet he feels this powerful, overwhelming love for them. Now, with your own children, when you bear a child, there is a hormone change that comes through your body. You basically get flooded with these bonding hormones. And so physiology works with God's plan, and you end up just really being propelled toward that infant, particularly mothers. But God has all of that love for each one of us. That intense parental love is a metaphor, and the mother's love is a metaphor for God's love. And so, yeah, I was really just kind of knocked off of my equilibrium by childbirth, and I realized when I looked at those little beings that all the things I wanted to accomplish didn't amount to a hill of beans next to what I poured into them and what I gave to them when they were at their most helpless. What I could pour into that life was going to have, I thought, eternal significance. And so I just knew that I had to be a really attentive and involved mother. And so I homeschooled my kids for many years, and I really bonded with them. Childbearing really changed me. So that's where we're going to start tonight as we kind of pursue this human timeline. We're going to talk about motherhood and then fatherhood and the impact that those motherhood and fatherhood have had, not on us only as parents of children, but children of our own parents. We're going to see how that bonding relationship, bonding experience with our primary caregivers is so essential to who we become. And I call it our first bonding lessons. So here's the life timeline I was talking about. These are the stages, the basic stages of relational development and human development, really. Step by step, each stage building on the last. Here's my first child. It is amazing to me how fat her cheeks were. You can see them. They like fill the whole picture frame. Both of my kids had massive cheeks, but especially the first one. And you know what God does to babies is he puts layers of fat on them. Babies are really cute, partly because they're fat. Can you imagine a skinny, emaciated baby? It wouldn't be as cuddly. It wouldn't compel us to hold it as much. Or can you imagine, worse yet, a baby that looked like one of us, but small? We wouldn't want to hold it at all. But God makes babies chubby and cuddly and soft so that we are propelled to physically connect with them. And really, the fat is a metaphor of the fat love. By the way, that kind of fat that a baby has is called brown fat, and it's much more insulative than white fat. So God is insulating the baby, the body of the baby, so that it doesn't get cold, so that it doesn't starve, so that it has that extra cushion. And in the same way, God has set up babies to be loved by those around them so that their soul can be fortified and equipped. There's so many things about the way a mother interacts with her child that is so geared and so designed to build the brain of that infant. Notice that when the mother holds the child to her breast, there is a direct line from the eyes of the infant to the eyes of the mother. That eye contact is very powerful in brain development. So as the baby learns to see, he can't see things very far away, but he can see things close up. And he looks into the eyes of his mother and he starts to conceptualize, he starts to feel, he starts to understand what love is as he's nursing at his mother's breast. Not only that, but there's oxytocin pouring into the body of the infant through the breast milk, and the stimulation of the breast is causing the mother's body to be loaded with oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone. It's really powerful stuff. And there's so many other ways in which God literally structured the brains of infants. Let's look at some, what we call attachment theory. Let's look at some basic facts that human development specialists have said that attachment to the mother provides the working framework for all subsequent relationships. So the mother is literally building that child's brain for love. The prefrontal cortex is almost nothing at birth. It's very undeveloped, except for the raw materials, but it hasn't been wired yet, so to speak. But the brain grows to 90% of its mass in the first 3 years of life. This is why children's heads are proportionately larger than adult heads. God is leaving space for that brain to develop. Amazingly, humans depend upon one another longer than any other animal in creation, and that provides more opportunity for bonding. So the growth of the brain requires this very rich and stimulating environment, and that comes through touch stimulation in nursing and the eye contact in nursing, like I mentioned a moment ago. And then also it comes through things like what we call prosody. So what would you do with your voice if I was a baby and you wanted to like acknowledge how cute I was? Your voice would go up into the higher register. Oh, you little cute, you're so cute, little baby, cute. And we do this type of thing because we're talking in a language a baby understands. I mean, their ears are very small. Their ears are much more capable of hearing higher range sounds, which is very interesting to me because their primary caregiver is usually the mother, who typically has a higher voice. But we do that involuntarily, just naturally, and it stimulates the brain of that infant. There are other things we do: rubbing, noses, tickling, play, this type of thing. And all of these activities that come so natural to us as we interact with infants summons up growth hormones, swelling the brain to its full capacity. God is literally building that child's brain. And aren't they just so adorable? Well, unfortunately, not every baby has the benefit of an excellent primary caregiver. And so bonding can go wrong. There are basically 2 disorders recorded in the diagnostic manual that are kind of 2 polar opposite ways that people can be affected by a bonding failure in infancy. So typically bonding failures happen when the parents are addicts, when the parents neglect their children, when the parents are abusive, God forbid, when the home is chaotic, when there's poverty, when there are a number of different conditions. Oftentimes bonding just can't take place to the degree that God designed it should. And this can produce some issues in that child as they grow. So one of the conditions is called reactive attachment disorder. The child will typically withdraw. They will not seek comfort from their primary caregiver. It's normal to seek comfort from someone who is your caregiver, but they won't seek comfort. They have low levels of emotional responsiveness, and they have negative emotion overdrive. So they tend to not be able to regulate their emotions and positivize their emotions very well. On the opposite end, like kind of the polar opposite of that, though, is people with something, or children with something called disinhibited social engagement disorder. These children are going to have low or no reticence with strangers. In other words, they don't have the typical stranger danger reflex at all. They're going to instead have instant familiarity. They're going to not so much check in with their caregiver like babies will do. Like if you have a baby and the mother hands the baby to a stranger, the baby's going to keep his eyes on the mother. Is this okay, mommy? Is this okay? But that doesn't happen in someone with this particular disorder, a child with this disorder, and they tend to be too trusting. So it's as if there's this mechanism in the brain, and this is fascinating to me. It's like this ability that human beings have, this faculty that we have, that enables us to build trust bonds with human beings. And it can either be broken in the sense that we never trust, or it can be broken in the sense that we overtrust. And what God is trying to help us to do, even as adults, is learn how to trust intelligently and effectively. So that can be influenced by what kind of home you had growing up. Not everybody comes to their adult years with the same set of bonding abilities. Some people have more, some have less, depending on their background. So this brings up the issue of CPTSD, or complex PTSD. It typically has the classic PTSD symptoms, including avoidance, re-experiencing mood problems, and reactivity problems. But complex post-traumatic stress disorder also has relationship difficulties, emotional regulation difficulties, cognitive difficulties, and self-perception difficulties. Now, complex post-traumatic stress disorder results from long-term micro assaults or neglects on usually a child. So PTSD typically comes from one event that overwhelms the nervous system of the individual, and typically it's active combat, sexual assault, or motor vehicle accidents. But CPTSD more often results from small things, small accumulated things happening over a long period of time, typically in childhood. So the parent neglects the child, isn't home with the child, and the child doesn't have their lunch that they came for. And then the mother finally comes home and gives the child a sandwich, but then the mother gets drunk and puts her cigarette out on her child's arm in irritation that night. So the child is getting, maybe some nurture, but a lot of neglect. And there's a lot of chaos in the home, a lot of difficulty, and that is going to affect their ability to bond. So our ability to say it's okay to ourselves, our ability to regulate our own emotions, is built off of our mother's regulation of us. The child's it's okay to himself is the result of the mother's it's okay to the child in infancy. We can see this reflected in Psalm 139, 131. It says, Lord, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to read it. Who's our first reader?
I think it's me, right, Jackie?
Okay.
Okay. So Psalm 131.
Yeah.
It says, Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor my eyes lofty. Neither do I concern myself with great matters, nor with things too profound for me. Surely I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with his mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forever.
Very good. Thank you for
131.
that. Notice that the word calmed, I have calmed and quieted my soul like a child with his mother. That word calmed is shavah, and it means to level or to balance. So here is the mother balancing the infant, and that is literally what happens to us in childhood. We're told the first 3 years is the time in which to bend the tiny twig. Mothers should understand the importance attaching to this period. It is then that the foundation is laid, and think of that in terms of the foundation of brain development. All right, so let's talk about dads, because yes, mothers are very important, but so are dads. Amen. And it's the absence of fathers in our families that are really wreaking havoc. Father absenteeism is a very, very significant hit on a child's life. Now, typically, fathers begin to bond with their children after they talk. It's not that fathers aren't interested in infants, but they're just not quite as intuitive about how to handle infants. Fathers tend to be more involved in children with play interactions versus those nurturance interactions. Men are less adaptive, so they tend to stretch children more. And so for instance, little Johnny comes to mother and says, he skinned his knee, and his mother's going to say, oh, Johnny got a boo-boo, and she's going to kiss him and hold him. And dad is going to say, let's go fishing. It's no big deal. So the fathers are going to be more inclined to stretch the child. The mothers are going to be more nurturing, and they play off each other, and they both provide a needed service to that child. Fathers tend to influence in politics and money, and mothers in religion and life. Now, tragically enough, 1 in 3 children grow up in biological father absent homes. 1 in 3. And all of the research that we read tells us that the child is best off in a biological family with the biological parents. It's not that adoptive parents can't be awesome and raise awesome kids, but overall, the child raised with the biological parents, both parents, is going to be better off. So let's look at the research on the presence of fathers in the home. And I'm just going to kind of reverse the research because the research is all the bad news, but I want to put it in terms of good news. So if the father is present in the home, the child is likely to be wealthier, healthier, more fit, better behaved, less likely incarcerated, freer of high-risk sexual behaviors, cleaner of drugs and alcohol, freer of physical and sexual abuse, and more academically successful. This is how impacting a father's presence in the home can be on a child. Isn't that profound? And God does whatever he can to keep that man home. Let me give you an example. When a woman becomes pregnant, her body starts to put out scents that are not really detectable. Cree, can you mute that account? That are not really detectable, but unconsciously the man apparently picks up the scent of his wife's body changing because she's pregnant, and then his body starts to put out higher levels of a hormone called vasopressin. Now, vasopressin is called the monogamy hormone because it cuts across the effect of testosterone, which is the prowling hormone is what it's called. Testosterone is responsible for sex drive, and men have higher levels of testosterone. And so their sex drive is in some ways higher. And as a result, they're slightly more inclined to prowl or cheat on their wives. Well, what God does is he floods the man's body with vasopressin to keep him home. And he ends up being, actually, men gain what they call empathy weight when their wives get pregnant. So those are the first two relationships in the life timeline. And those are very impacting relationships. And I've tried to point out to you how they are impacting. But I want to just close off with a few thoughts about kind of now what. You know, we've all been raised by our parents already, for better or for worse. Maybe we had a really good parenting dyad and everything was pretty much according to the ideal. Maybe we didn't. Chances are many of you had very difficult and chaotic homes growing up. So I want to say now what? I want to address now what, because the reality is that we have the rest of our lives to live. And whether things went right or they went wrong, we want to make the best of our situation. So here's something I really want to clarify. And that is that we talk about the relationship between nature and nurture. Nature is basically genetics, and nurture is basically our home environment growing up. So I've been focusing mostly on the home environment, the nurture part of the inheritance question. So in science, we'll constantly toss back and forth. Well, what's nature and what's nurture? What things are caused by nature? What things are caused by nurture? What is influencing this, nature or nurture, as if those are the only two things that exist. But actually, people also have free will. And while nature and nurture will create in us a disposition towards certain things, our choice ultimately determines our destiny. And more specifically, our choice in harmony with God's choice for us. So our will aligned with God's will, receiving the power of his Holy Spirit to follow his plan for us, ultimately determines our destiny. So the hard knocks you got growing up, the difficulties, the chaos in your home, the addiction, the abuse, whatever was going on, may have created in you a certain disposition. And you may struggle and have a steeper climb toward faith, toward good, healthy development. But you know what, guys? A steeper climb means bigger muscles. And so that's where choice comes in. You can choose to proactively learn how to love and be loved in ways that maybe your home of origin did not teach you. And on this principle, God requires that we honor our parents. Now, I want to kind of break apart and deconstruct this whole concept of honoring father and mother. It's one of the commandments. And Paul said, obey your parents in the Lord. This is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. So first of all, I want to say that there are some parents in the world that don't deserve the title parents. If a parent abuses his child growing up over and over again, that's not really parenting at all. It's progenerating, it's producing maybe a child biologically, but it's not true parenting. So when God tells us to honor our parents, he's talking about honoring the people that took care of us while we were growing up. And then he says, honor your father and mother, that it may be well with you. Why is it that when we honor our parents, it is well with us? I think what's being brought out here is a principle. And the principle is this, that when people sacrifice for you, you can trust them. If they sacrifice for you, then honor in proportion to the sacrifice. Listen to their counsel. Understand who they are. Respect their views because they have invested in you. And if you will learn how to trust people that have earned your trust, people that have sacrificed for you, it is going to be well with you. But if you instead trust people who have not sacrificed for you and give yourself over to people who have not earned the right to your heart, you're going to bring suffering upon yourself. So what God is bringing out here is a timeless principle of that true authority is based on sacrifice. And yes, we should honor authority, but we should honor true authority, our parents or whatever, our leaders in the Lord, right? And then he flips the script a bit here and he says, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath. So the parents have a responsibility in how they treat their children, that they create the greatest likelihood that that child will honor his or her parent. We are to bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. And that's just a general principle that when we yield power and authority over anyone, we must do it in such a way that we do not enlist that person toward rebellion. Now, I want to say something, guys, to those of you that are listening to this presentation and thinking, oh, I'm such damaged goods. I didn't really have a good relationship with my parents. Well, here's the good news. See, God reparents us. He is the father of the fatherless, the defender of the widows. He is the everlasting Father. He presents himself as a nursing. God is not above presenting himself as a woman. I don't really know what to say about what sex God is. I don't think he is a sex. Male and female made he them in his image. I'm not sure. He does present himself as a man in scripture, but I think that's so that we stand. But he also presents himself as a womanly figure, a nursing mother, one who gives birth, a mother hen. So I want to encourage you guys, if you didn't have a father, you didn't have a mother, worth calling a father and a mother. Or maybe there were just some tragedies and your parents did the best they could, but they were so compromised themselves that they really couldn't give you what you needed, or whatever went wrong in your home of origin. I want to encourage you because the psalmist said, when my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take care of me. God will step in where human beings failed you, and he will bless you and he will take it from here. Okay, let's have some discussion. How are you guys doing?